An advanced electric alarm clock was ringing and this woke up Gazuk. He knew it was the day of Galacticon, and quickly got out of bed to get ready. He brought out his rucksack and placed a few items of memorabilia inside. After breakfast involving microwavable eggs and meat, he sets off to the integer line heading to the city. The planet Kirazo is a city-living utopia, founded by a group of survivors who consisted of university-educated architects and tech millionaires from the planet Earth. They escaped the horrors from the so-called invaders and ended up on the planet. It originally consisted of small pod-like towns and barren yellow deserts. As the years went on, they adapted to a shiny, clean concrete and fiberglass jungle. Gazuk waited until the integer line stopped at where he wanted to be. He was meeting a group of fans of a show called Professor X, whom he got acquainted via internet forums discussing the show and got introduced to the wider fandom. Gazuk arrived at the platform and was greeted by Batty, Forlock and Reese. The quartet headed to the convention center, presented their tickets and entered in. Gazuk was like he was in heaven. Cosplayers abound and all sorts of memorabilia from tinkly toys to autographs prints. Then he saw a poster of the actor was portraying Professor X, Arnold Corns, 2 seasons in, and was becoming a quick favorite. He gazed at it for at least 10 minutes and decided to rejoin the group before the panel would begin. Meanwhile, the TARDIS lands in a small space. The Doctor sticks his head out and realizes where they've landed, a men's lavatory. He then notices a group of men in costumes from various franchises and he quickly twigged where the TARDIS had ended up. A convention, specifically a science fiction one. Louisa followed out and the men in costumes quickly pulled up their zippers. A woman in a men's lavatory and started to act cool in front of her. She didn't care about that and said to the Doctor that they go out. The two ended up in the convention center. It was filled with stalls of memorabilia and many people in cosplay. The Doctor was quite intrigued by this. He never been to one in his lives. He had heard of them but stepped foot in one. Louisa, on the other hand, wasn't interested. She wasn't into the franchise worshipping business but had seen shows like Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica. She met a guy called Chad Neeler at high school who got bullied constantly just because he was a nerd. She felt sympathetic towards him and decided to out on a date with him. What happened was he wanted marathon the original Star Trek series with William Shatner and he kept telling trivia that went completely over her head. Eventually he went for a toilet break and when he left she climbed out one of the house windows. She felt a bit disheartened that she duped him halfway through but he wanted to indulge in his nerdiness and she couldn't take it. The Doctor then turned his attention to a stall that was selling vintage comics. He wondered if there were copies of The Eagle that were published between 1982 and 1994. They seemed to be hard to find these days. Gazuk looked around and then noticed the Doctor at the vintage comics stall. He approached him and started questioning his outfit. The Doctor didn't care at first until when Gazuk mentioned something of an old actor portraying Professor X in a similar costume. The Doctor quickly turned to him, looked at him with his Professor X shirt, his unkempt hair, his species teenager face and geeky mannerisms. The Doctor told him that show was an act of plagiarism on his existence, making a mockery of his travels, and Gazuk's only response was that he was a consultant on the show. The Doctor nearly blew a gasket at this response and denied any involvement with it. If these television producers approached him with the idea, he would vetoed it immediately or sent them to an acid swamp somewhere in the Voltilla system. Gazuk shrilly apologized to him. The Doctor just looked at him and Gazuk said, "There's a panel of the show." The Doctor's ears twigged and decided to go there himself. Gazuk said he's going to be there too after he's a fan of the show. The Doctor just rolled his eyes and decided to head elsewhere. The Doctor, Louisa and Gazuk later sat down in the chair of the Professor X panel. He looked around. They were people dressed up similar to him but in distinct styles. Next to him were a couple, a woman who was supposedly to be his 6th incarnation and the man was a companion called Carl, a Cockney chimney sweep. The Doctor was taken aback by this and thought this dissected interpretation of a show was, as he called it, fantasy bollocks. The panelist then entered the hall and began announcing the arrival of Arnold Corns. The crowd were cheering. The Doctor just folded his arms in disgust. Louisa just sat clueless and Gazuk was joining in. Arnold Corns sat down and chatted to the panelist. Stuff was said like his 3rd season had just wrapped filming and other stuff involving misadventures with the cast and crew. A question and answer session took place. Generic answers that the fandom will say other and other again. Once Arnold Corns left, the Doctor stood up from his chair. Louisa asked where he was going. He said to her that he's going to have a conversation with Unrecorded. She said to him that he doesn't do anything stupid when he meets him. He said to her that he won't lay a finger on him, and then Gazuk chimes in. He asked him if he could join him. The doctor said no and also said to him that his business not this. The doctor left, leaving Louisa and Gazuk on their own. Gazuk made some small talk to her. She did a little, though it took her back to when she was with Chad Neela, and then he said some words that caught her attention. He said she was beautiful in a retro sentimental way. She blushed little and said he says it all the girls. He felt a bit down after that. He said the girls on Kirazo are either in two categories. The gorgeous ones with their pencil-thin bodies living off on diet pill the size of a grain of rice and their air-headed minds, totally oblivious to the world around them. And the slum ones, women who slackers, overweight and constantly moaning on the internet for attention. She looked at him with some sympathy. This world he was living in seemed to be in a social crisis. When Gazuk returned to the stalls, the Professor X crowd had left. He felt deserted by them and then sat down on the floor with his head in his hands. Louisa saw this and came to him. Then something popped into her head and suddenly blurted it out. Was he a virgin? Gazuk looked up baffled. Of course he was, and had no partnership with any woman. Then she pulled up him and said she'll take him somewhere. Gazuk started to sweat in anxiety. What is she going to do with him? Louisa took Gazuk into the ladies' lavatory and quickly stuffed him into one of the stalls. She whispered to take his pants off. He was very nervous about this but wanted to take the opportunity. When Louisa began to unfasten her pants, she stopped and looked down at Gazuk's groin. He had a flesh-like nub instead of a penis. She said to him that he hasn't got one, and Gazuk explained that it's a part of genetic birthing. The parents take a sample of each of their blood and it's genetically mixed to form a newborn. That's why the population is like this. She felt a bit disappointed and said that she's landed in a planet-sized convent. Gazuk pulled his pants up and apologized to her of his true form. She said it was okay, hugged him, and then said that least kissing hasn't been removed from this world. He embraced her, smooching, even trying not fall down as she was pushing him against the stall wall. They quickly leave the ladies' lavatory and ended up in the corridors. Gazuk thanked her, felt like he was given the kiss of life, and she giggled at the response. His wristwatch started bleeping. He said he has to get back home via the integer line. She said to him that she'll walk with him to the platform and he kindly accepts. As the integer line stopped, Gazuk bided farewell to Louisa. They hugged and he headed off back home. Louisa looked on as the integer line started to move away and gave a little wave as it went. When she returned to the convention hall, she could see a riot was happening. Then she saw the doctor being chased by security guards and cosplayers. He shouted to her to get back to the TARDIS. She did so and raced into the men's lavatory. The doctor flew in through the doors and closed him. He quickly headed to the console and set some controls. Louisa sat down on the chair with her arms folded and her legs crossed. She sternly asked him what did he do. The doctor said he only went to talk to Arnold Corns in the green room. While he was there, Corns caught drunk and started trying to do unreasonable things to him. So they knocked him out by putting his index finger on his forehead, knocking him out. She just gave a groan at this and then said he had to do something. That show was plagiarizing his own life and he wanted to sabotage it one way or another. She still looked at him and said that he wasn't missing much with the people of Kirazo. Major social issues and that no one has no genitalia. He wasn't surprised by those reveals. Planets have similar issues. If they go to another planet it'll be same but different environments, and then twiddled a few switches. She understood this, but it was the first time she ever witnessed something like that and went on about the blood sample generic birthing. After the events of Galacticon, Arnold Corns retired from the role of Professor X after his third season and returned to being a solo music artist. Unlike other actors who turn up to conventions and reunions, he remained a recluse. Still releasing music but never did interviews and stayed private till his death following a series of organ failures. He was 71.